With me now is Nicole, who from Sydney, who used to have a radio show on Radio Skid Row, but doesn't anymore. But before we get into that whole story, which I think most of Jewish Australia at least have heard now, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What are you doing radio in Sydney? What's your background?
I'm from Mexico,
Ah,
and I moved to Sydney 8 years ago, going on 9. I've always been, my main profession has always been teaching. I work with little children. I love the connecting aspect, and I've been teaching for 13 years. But coming to Australia, I've had to start to consider a change of career, considering my degree is not recognized here because
ah,
it was done in Mexico.
right.
So I have been in learning support, and I had my children. They're very little still, but now I'm finally coming out and exploring things that I've always wanted to do. I've worked a little bit in media, dabbled here and there. I'm extremely passionate about music. I used to be a singer as well, just
Ah.
a side thing. And that's how I came across radio and this certification. I've always wanted to do it. And that's how I ended up volunteering and having my own radio, my own show at Skid Row.
Yeah, and it's nice to volunteer and have your own show. I know what it's like. It's good fun.
It's an
So,
amazing opportunity, yeah.
exactly. So, what happened at Skid Row? All of a sudden, you got this called into this meeting.
Yeah. It was well, I had my show just for a short amount of time. So
Hmm,
it's been about a month. So we had done about four different episodes. And on the fifth one, I had my first ever live band coming to interview, to play. I had organized for this. I was extremely excited, but ever since I started volunteering there, I'd seen their free Palestine stickers, their gays for Palestine stickers, their anti-Israel boycott, stop the all of that propaganda
yeah,
all over the studio, which I was just trying to ignore. I would just come in, I would do my show. It's not political, and and I
What
would just
what what was your show about?
my show was it was called Frecuencia Latina, which was the Latin frequency.
Right,
And it was just about connecting the Latin community in Australia
right.
and talking about anything human, really. It could be anecdotal, it could be relationships, it could be, being expats, it could be parenting in a different country or with the different cultural aspects. Music, it had a different theme every episode,
Uh-huh.
and we would dig deep and make it fun as well.
Hmm.
So it was a light show just built for connection
Yep,
and
yep.
for fun. And yeah, so on the day that I had my first ever interview, the manager came in to help. Manu, he was my manager, and he came in to help in case we needed any help with the technical stuff because we were
Sure.
in charge of all the controls of everything as well.
Yep.
And we were still new. So
I know what it's like. Yes.
I'm sure you do. It's nerve-wracking more than the actual talking. And before the band arrived, I casually propped up a vinyl record up against this console that had the big Free Palestine sticker
Right.
because there's so many things about that I don't stand for. I have
Hmm.
nothing against Palestine in itself. I have nothing pro war, or I'm equally horrified with what I see in the news, but my show is not political. What
Hmm.
this whole movement has done to the Jewish community, people have been using it to polarize, to antagonize, and I didn't feel comfortable having it there because it doesn't represent me.
Yep.
And I didn't know how my guests would feel either. And this was the first time I was gonna have people come in and it be recorded. Um, so the next day, Manu texted me and asked me to come in on Friday so that we could have a chat. And I knew what it was about because my co-host had told me that he had mentioned something about him being taken aback about me covering it.
Right.
Um, she's not Jewish, and well, she's very supportive of me. She
Your
didn't,
co-host.
yeah, my
Yeah.
co-host.
Yeah.
She didn't want to have anything to do with all of that, and for her it was a lot easier to ignore that stuff, but it
Mm.
wasn't for me. And I went in. Before I went in, he told me there's going to be a third person. And I said, "Oh, this doesn't feel like a casual chat whenever there's a third person." And he said, "You have nothing to worry about. It's just, for everyone's safety. We take our values very seriously. And so everyone feels comfortable. You're free to bring somebody in." And I brought in my husband. Now, I brought him in not because I thought the conversation was going to go Ari. I
Yeah.
brought him in because I get really choked up with difficult conversations
Sure.
and confrontation, and I tend to start blubbering. And he knew what I would want to say, so I brought
Yeah.
him in case I would get choked up. Um, thank God he came in because I had no idea I would actually need a witness
Mm.
for
Mm.
what ended up happening. But that's how it led up to that meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened?
When we arrived, the third person that was there was a woman. Her name is Ilhan. I'd never met her before. She was just recently hired for fundraising, ironically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And she barely wanted to say hello to me. It was cold shoulder from the get-go. And I knew this was gonna be of a
Mm.
political aspect, but
Yeah.
I had been wanting to talk to Manu about my how uncomfortable I felt about the stickers for a while. So I had really gone over how to keep it non-political and just talk about me and try to keep it calm,
Yeah.
um, without trying to impose my ideals or views onto anyone or vice versa. So I I collectedly and calmly started explaining to them that that I know that the radio station stands for justice and stands for representation and stands for peace and
Mm.
stands for all these wonderful things that I stand for as well. So I know that the station is probably not using the pro Palestine movement in the way that a lot of people are, which is coming from aggression and then borderline or full on anti Semitism and
Mm.
anywhere in between.
Yeah.
Um, and so much polarization as well, like turning it into such a black and white thing and just adding more hate.
Mm.
And I said, I know this isn't what you're doing, but these stickers, these slogans, these flyers, all these things, they have inadvertently caused a lot of anti-Semitism in Australia. And this is why our terror threat level is high. This is why there's fire bombings in synagogues in Melbourne and cars being vandalized in Wallara, and Jewish people like me being scared to take my children into the city because
Yeah.
there's always protests of people screaming things like from the river to the sea and just horrific things and really aggressive towards the Jewish community in general.
Yes.
So this is where I'm coming from. At this point, I was already getting choked up, but I was still calm.
It's a difficult conversation.
It's a very difficult conversation because even though this is something that also affects non-Jews,
Mm.
for Jews, it's more triggering and it's more personal. We've got an inherited trauma here with this.
Yeah.
And I told them, it scares me. I have family that died in the Holocaust. This is how that even started back in the day. And it's really scary and triggering to see. And at this point, Ilhan, the woman, started laughing at me. And I was trying to ignore it, but she wasn't stopping. And I was like, I don't understand why you're laughing. And my husband turned around and said, This isn't funny. And she continued to laugh. And Manu, my manager, ignored it and didn't say anything, didn't try to stop it. And I said, I tried to ignore and just keep pushing. And I
Mm.
said, I was also taken aback when I saw the radiothon flyer for collecting donations. They had a radiothon, and the whole background was the kafiyeh, the
All
Palestinian
right.
scarf. And I said, look, I mean, this is triggering. I couldn't share that with my friends. This is what what the terrorists were wearing when they came into Israel on October 7th and did
Mm.
everything that they did. And that's when this woman turned around and says, nobody was raped, nobody was beheaded, nobody was burnt on October 7th, just flat out denied it.
Wow.
And at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to really get anywhere. And I knew I didn't want it to get political because she was just supposed to be the observer.
Yeah.
And this felt more like an ambush. They knew this was going to be a difficult conversation. They knew I was Jewish and they knew I was half Israeli, my
Yeah.
mother being from Israel and having family there. Um, so at that point, I just said, I'm not going to talk politics here. I'm not here to try to put my views onto somebody else, nor the other way around. I'm just asking to be respected. I
Mm.
respect you have your views. I have my views. My show is not political. That makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want it viewed on my show, and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and she was telling me, I resent that you're making this personal. And I said, it is personal. This is about me and my show, not the conflict. And I said, if you speak of representation and representing everyone, then how about we also put a yellow ribbon
Mm.
next to the Free Palestine sticker and represent both sides of human suffering,
Yeah. Yeah.
And she turns around and says, absolutely not. That's Nakba, which I had no idea what it meant at the time. I had to Google it afterwards.
Right.
But I assumed by the way she said it, it was. And at that point, my manager, Manu, started throwing in the whole occupation and colonialism. And, he started saying that you won't see an Australian flag in the studio. You won't see a US flag, Canadian flag. And if there was an Israeli flag, they'd also rip it down. They don't stand for it, which is ironic because their funding comes from the city,
Yes.
from the government that they're so against. Um, and they started going into the occupation and into how they don't believe that Israel has a right to exist, how from the river to the sea, Israel should be Palestine and Jews shouldn't be there.
So they were totally political.
100%. And that's again when I said, look, I'm not going to get into that. And she said, yes, you are. And I said, nobody in this room can pretend to know enough to be able to get down to the bottom of it. It's been a centuries long issue. Even the most studied people, the experts in the topic cannot come and tell you, look, this is the solution, this is what it is. It's extremely polarizing, and no one here can pretend to know enough to
Mm.
discuss this. And I'm not going to start. And they continued going around in circles. And at that point, my husband says, I was just quiet and I was just trying to gather my thoughts because I didn't know what more to say. And
Mm.
my husband said, so if Nicole was to continue her show, and which is not political and just as it is and not cover anything up, would she be able to? And they said, if we choose for her to stay, then she would need to support the Palestinian resistance.
Wow.
And I assumed that I knew what they meant, but I wanted them to be very clear on it.
Mm.
So I asked, what do you mean by Palestinian resistance? And they said, they started going around in circles. And I said, no, hold on. Like, just let's get down to it. Do you think that what happened on October 7th is the Palestinian resistance that you support? And they said, yes.
Wow.
And I said, so is this something I would need to support as a good thing? And my manager, Manu, said, yes.
Wow.
And then I said, so you're saying the Palestinian resistance is the keeping of the hostages of innocent people? And they said, yes. And they said that if I wanted to stay, I would have to actively support it. And I said, what do you mean by actively support? And they said, you would need to speak about it on your show and attend our rallies.
Wow.
And that's when I said, I absolutely cannot do that.
Mm.
They said, if we choose to let you stay, we could even get someone to teach you. Like,
Oh
how
my
really?
God.
And that's when I said, I'm not here.
They wanted to re-educate you.
Insane. And I couldn't believe what they were telling me because Manu had been the sweetest, kindest, so preoccupied over people's pronouns and people feeling comfortable. And I couldn't believe this was happening. And I said, I'm not here to be taught. I'm not here to teach. I'm just here to do my show. And the woman kept laughing the whole time, and I was getting really infuriated. So I stepped out to calm down and collect myself because I didn't want
Mm.
to react. And when I came back in, I didn't even sit down, but I just said, look, if we can't find a point of respect, if we can't respect each other in this room, then what hope is there for the world?
Yeah,
And they didn't say anything. So I told Manu, thank you for respectfully listening to me. And I told her, thank you for listening, although I don't appreciate you laughing at how difficult this is for me and my emotions. And that's when she turns around and says, I don't appreciate your white woman tears.
my goodness gracious.
And that's when I stormed out. I stormed out. I yelled, this is, I'm not going to say what. And I stormed out and um,
Wow,
and lost it in the privacy of my car. But yeah, so that's what happened. And
wow.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they contacted you afterwards,
only to send me my dismissal of volunteership.
right?
This happened on a Friday, and on Monday, when Caroline had reached out to them for comment before airing the Sky News interview,
Yeah.
um, right after that, I think they sent me an email of dismissal, and they dismissed me for not respecting their views and for their safety, and just completely turned it around on me. That's the only communication I've gotten from them since.
And that's it.
That's it.
Wow. So where to now for you?
I'm Look, radio's not over for me, that's for sure. But
Good, good.
right now, I'm trying to. First, I'm trying to just process this and trying to figure out what to do next, because there's been this whole other process that's starting afterwards, and Jewish associations and like people that want to get involved. And I would like this. The reason I came forward is because I feel like all these things that are happening to Jewish people
Hmm.
are flying under the radar.
That's right.
And
It needs to
it's
be publicly known. Absolutely.
it needs to be
100%.
public. People need to see it. And also, this has nothing to do with me being Jewish. If I was Catholic, Muslim, Christian, it would be wrong.
Hmm.
It would be wrong. It's just extra wrong because it is my people they did this to. But
Absolutely.
it's it is completely wrong, and it's just the human aspect. And I just don't think that this should be allowed and that people can just get away with this,
Hmm.
because then it's just going to continue. And I already kind of live nervously as a Jewish person in Sydney
Yes,
with children. And that's wrong. No one should live that way.
absolutely not.
So I'm just seeing what I can do with this so I can, continue to make this more visible. And I really want to just sit down and collect my thoughts and gather
Yeah.
my new focus on what my radio show would be, because it would no longer be, probably not with my co-host. And now I can do whatever I want because they kind of pushed the Latino thing on me so that they could get funding from
Oh, I
the
see.
government because I'm
Okay.
Mexican. I was happy to do it. I love
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
community, but I would have liked to be able to speak in English so everyone can hear.
Absolutely. What about your co-host?
She didn't want to be involved in any of this
Sure.
or mentioned or anything. She's been supportive, but she's very uncomfortable with all of this. And she's
Mm.
also grieving the loss of our show because this was also a dream of hers.
So the show's been scrapped altogether.
Yes, yes. And she also wouldn't want to, she's not Jewish, but regardless of that, she said, their views scare her. And
Mm.
when she found out all of this stuff that came out and the things that they told me, she also said she doesn't want to be part of that
Wow.
station.
So you're looking to publicize this. I'm not sure whether I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know whether there are any legal responses to that sort of treatment. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
mm,
I'm looking into it. not for any sort of monetary gain, because that's not at all what this is about.
Mm,
I just feel like there has to be some consequence for this because
absolutely.
the things that even came out afterwards in Caroline's report, I had no idea they had these shows where their logo was the Hamas symbol for the targets and all of these extremely aggressive, hate fueled, and they're using community radio for this.
Wow.
So, yeah, I just think that shouldn't be possible.
Well, thank you for painting the picture, as it were. It's a frightening story because it just shows how this whole situation has been twisted so badly against the Jewish community here.
Yeah,
So thank you for sharing it with us.
no, happy to.
And I do hope something comes out of it. And it would be nice to have you on radio again.
Yes, it would be nice to be on it. I will be in due
Good.
time, for sure.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.